The extraordinary rendition of Janos Farkas. Chapter 3. There was a muffled darkness about her, the only sound the thumping in her head. Ayne pushed herself to her knees, and a wave of nausea rose with her. The theater was empty and only silhouetted by the shafts of morning light that snuck past the heavy curtains blackening out the windows. The whole thing seemed a Sarajevo set. She looked at her watch. It was 6:30 a.m. How long had it been? She must have been unconscious for over 7 hours. She put a hand on a chair to help herself up. The chair slid, and its scraping noise accentuated the emptiness. She reached for another chair, half expecting Janos's hand to reach out and help her up. Janos. Where was he? She whispered his name aloud. Janos. There was no answer, and then she whispered, "Help." There was no answer to that either. Working hard to create saliva, she moved her jaw up and down, sucking her tongue with it, finally making enough spit to swallow. It did little for her throat, but the working of the mouth and the first saliva was followed by more, and when she found her purse, she took out the small bottle of aspirin, took 2, and got enough spit to swallow them. "Help," she said, loudly this time, just to be sure. "Help." There was no answer. She had not expected any. It seemed like an enormously stupid thing to do, but she did it anyway. She pinched herself. The unreality was real. She reached with her right hand to her left. The ring was still there, small, thin, and gold. This was her new reality. This was her role. Where was Janos? She had met him 3 months ago in a warehouse just like this one, and just like the dozens of others that were pressed into duty as illegal theaters, galleries, and clubs in eastern Berlin. It was the alternative scene, electronic music with the occasional live musician who would join in. The colored lights were set off by the music, and as the music changed, so did the pattern of the lights. On the stage, a man was reading poetry to the music. No one was listening. The music ended before the poem, and it was only then that a few people looked up at him. He made an exaggerated bow and left the stage. She went over. "I saw you at the Blue Elephant in London 2 years ago," she said. "You were doing a play. I think it was called The Shelter. I don't know. I didn't understand the language." "Sklenist," he replied. "Sklenist by Sefet Plakalo. That is the name of the play. The translation is The Shelter." "Oh," she said. "Did you like it?" he asked. "There weren't many people there," she replied, avoiding the answer. "No," he said. "Sarajevo had already been replaced by Baghdad and Kabul." "There were some Arabs," she said. "I remember that. One looked very important, like he might have been a prince or a sheik or something. Was he?" "I don't remember," he answered. "He was wearing one of those things over his head, red and white like Arafat." "That was Prince Howd. He is a patron of the arts. It is hard to produce contemporary, leading-edge theater without a patron. Theater is expensive. The prince helps us out." "No," he said. "It's you that I don't remember." "I'm Ayne," she said. "Ayne Craig." "Ayne," he said. "American?" "Yes," she answered. She waited for his introduction, but when it didn't come, she said, "You're Janos. Janos Farkas. You were an important actor with the Sarajevo War Theater during the siege and bombing of Sarajevo." "Who told you that?" "It was on the program from the Blue Elephant. I still have it." "Then you knew the name of the play." "I didn't know how to pronounce it." He looked at her in a way that made her wonder what she was doing there. He turned to go. "I liked it," she said. He turned back. "I liked it very much. I thought you were great." This time he smiled. They left the noise and the brightness of the underground club and made their way down a side street to a small bar where Janos ordered pigtails and beer. Ayne declined the pigtails but accepted the beer. "You're not hungry?" he asked. "Pigtails aren't really part of my repertoire," she replied, smiling. "It's not something we ate in New Jersey." "Oh," he said, "they really shouldn't be part of my repertoire either." "Why?" "A good Muslim doesn't eat pork. It is forbidden." "Then why do you?" "I am not a good Muslim." She forgave him with a grin that was all lips and teeth. For the next hour they passed the time with small talk that is usually the prelude to lovemaking. But at 4:30 she looked at her watch. "I have to go," she said. "It is almost dawn." "My place is just around the corner," he answered. "That's nice for you," she replied, "but my little hotel is all the way over in West Berlin. It'll take me an hour to get back, if I can find a cab." He offered her his bed once more, and once more she refused. He found her a taxi, and on the ride home, she wondered if she had made a mistake. But the next morning he was waiting outside her hotel. They had breakfast. 2 months later they were married in a cramped gray room by some minor German official. No family came to the bleak ceremony, and as the official spoke the words, Ayne was saying to herself, "It is the holy state of darkness I am entering into. Am I ready for it? Can I do it?" Their wedding pictures were taken in a photo booth at the train station, and for weeks Ayne stared at the wedding certificate and photo booth photos and wondered if it were true. In the end, she decided it didn't matter. It was true enough for her. Walking over to a window in the makeshift theater, Ayne pushed a curtain aside. The old blackout curtain shed dust that sparkled in the hard shaft of light. The Strauss was quiet. In the new light, the room took on an almost normal look. The props and set pieces on the stage looked simplistic and inoffensive. The neat rows of stacking chairs seemed school-like. Only where she had been were they out of order. She walked to the back of the room and, on tiptoes, reached up and across the gray-green plaster wall. In the uneven surface her fingers found a hole. Neat and round, it was made by a bullet traveling too fast to create a crater around it. She drew her finger sharply back, as if she had just touched a snake's eye. She wanted to run hard and fast. But where? And to whom? In the street, she hesitated, not knowing which way to turn. They had been on a perpetual honeymoon since their marriage, staying in a suite at the posh Brandenburger Hof Hotel. It was extremely expensive, but Janos never seemed to worry about money. Floating in a sea of bubbles in an enormous bath, he had told her he would take her on a real honeymoon to an exotic location. "When?" she had asked. "Soon," he replied. "Where?" she asked. "Paris?" "Yes," he replied with a smile. "The Paris of the East, Beirut." "You have only just married me and already you want to get me killed?" He laughed. "You are much too innocent to die young." And he pushed her head under the bubbles and then kissed her soapy lips. Lying in bed that night she had asked, "Why Beirut?" But he only told her that he had a job to do there. She knew from his voice that what she wanted to know wasn't something he was going to share with her. His flat lay somewhere close to where she was now. She had only been to it once, one night of passion that had turned into 3. After that came her hotel, then others, and to celebrate their wedding night, the Brandenburger Hof. She turned left, and that part of her that was programmed for directions led her to a main square, where she reoriented herself, then took a series of turns down small streets until she came to a block of old Soviet-era flats. The crusty, gray, and balding building concierge stopped her before she could reach the stairs. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To my husband's flat," she answered. He waved his thin arm in the air. "And who is your husband?" "Janos Farkas, the famous actor." "No actor lives here," he said. "Yes, he does. Janos Farkas," she replied, as if repeating his name would make everything plain. "No one lives here by that name," the concierge said. "Now clear out before I call the police." Ayne went over and stood face to face with the man. "Listen, old man, I am an American citizen. I am married to Janos Farkas. I know he has a flat here because I stayed here with him. It is flat 3B. And if you don't let me in, it will be I who is calling the police. Me. Capiche?" The old man stood firmly in front of her, his neck thrust from the bent shoulders, his chin out. She could sense that he was a man who was not used to having a woman answer back to him. She leaned her face nauseatingly close. "The police, understand? Capiche? The police. Das Police." The old man was the first to blink. He blinked because he needed to look away, and when he looked back she could see fear in his eyes. A fear that was not rational with just showing a flat. "Just a moment," he said. "I'll get the keys." He disappeared through the door of his ground floor flat. It was taking too long to just get keys, so Ayne went over to the door. She could hear a low, muffled, one-sided conversation. He was on the phone. Whoever was on the other end was doing most of the talking. When she heard him hang up, she moved away from the door. He came out glaring at her. She followed him up the stairs to the 3rd floor and along the corridor to the 3rd of 4 flats, 3B. He unlocked the door and pushed it open for her. She didn't know what to expect. That's the end of Chapter 3. Tomorrow, Chapter 4.